welcome back to our Newsday. Back to our discussion on fuel subsidy removal in Nigeria. We have joining us for more discussion a lawyer and financial expert, Opeyemi Olufunke, and researcher and policy developer, Omaholo Omwakanen. Welcome to Newsday. Thank you so much for joining us. Opeyemi, first, I would like to ask, what's your take on the federal government's decision to suspend the removal of fuel subsidy, citing high inflation rate?
Thank you very much for that question. I think that it's a very, very, very great move in the right direction. If you look at the inflation rate of Nigeria at the third quarter, which was about 15.44%, you would see that, and which also resulted in the spike of food produce and other things, you would see that it is indeed a welcome development for Nigerians, as many people are struggling to actually get their daily bread. So yes, it might have some political undertone, but definitely in the long run, something that is good for Nigeria.
Omaholo, let me throw this question to you. We have been discussing the timing of this decision, seeing as how for weeks, in fact months, CSOs and a bunch of civics organizations have been calling for the same to happen, and now it's happening. We're just wondering about the timing. What do you have to say about the timing?
Well, thank you for having me. What we are experiencing is a classical case of political economy, where the government cannot take decisions merely looking at the economic fundamentals. It reminds me of a class we had at the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, where I am from, where we examined the topic, competition requires a firm focus on economic fundamentals. Politics merely gets in the way. And we've seen that throughout history, governments are faced with the realities, like my colleague has said, and in the face of opposition from labor, from civil society, they back down. The timing, it is expected 1 year to elections. Any government that takes a decision that's that radical will be shooting itself in the foot. So it's a political decision, obviously.
Let me quickly come to you, Oluwaseun. What are your thoughts regarding what we've just heard, from the Minister of State for Petroleum Resource?
Yeah, I think that it's also a move in the right direction, that we are also discussing some other modalities and expansion of what they actually mean by the federal government backing down. Because the federal government won't just say, oh, we are backing down on ending fuel subsidy. How do you plan to do that? When do you plan to do that? What part of the budget is going to sustain your citizens even before or after you have made that decision? So I like that we're having conversations like this. And this is what the School of Politics, Policy and Governance that myself and my colleague currently came from, I've tried to talk about over and over again, the need for leaders to actually consider the end product of what they are doing and its effects on its citizens.
All right, it seems that the questions are being posed now. But in the meantime, let's get your reactions to what the Petroleum Minister just said, Akolo.
Yeah, the Petroleum Minister emphasized the economic factors, the socio-economic factors, which are crucial and critical. And it just reminds me that what we're dealing with is what analysts may call a catch-22 situation. And if you will permit me, in a session at SPPG, we had former head of state, General Abdul Salami Abubakar, talking to us on the issues surrounding the Constitution. Permit me to digress a bit, because we are experiencing virtually the same thing here. And he gave us reasons why in 1999, the constitutional process had to be expedited through the Ndiki-Toby committee. And he told us that also the 1979 constitution was there to revisit and revive. And then when we had opportunity to dialogue with him, I asked him a question, and I said, General, you had 20 years in between 1979 and 1999. A lot would have happened. Why didn't you consider it necessary at that point to hold constitutional conference for reforms? And he told us he was in a very difficult situation. And the moderator of that session was Dr. Opeyemi, and she told us that what we were seeing at play was a catch-22 situation where the government faces a very severe and difficult situation, a dilemma. And what is required is tough choices. You need leaders who will take the tough choices that are albeit creative, because you cannot make those tough choices without taking into consideration the impact it will have on the people.
One thing that I've learned, economically about subsidy is that you can't subsidize subsidy. You can't say you want to remove something and then plan to create some kind of subsidy for some other things. So take, for instance, in November of 2021, we found that the government said they were going to be giving 5,000 transport allowance to certain people in Nigeria.
40 million.
40 million people. I think it was going into billions of naira. So, that should have been, we are going to do this. We're going to do this to help you ease off the subsidy we are removing. But in economics, you don't, try to give Peter something and then take it with Paul. You have to actually take a look back and look at the economic policies that are actually affecting the day-to-day lives of your citizens, so that when those times come, money is what makes people have the power to make decisions appropriate for them. So saying that, we are going to give 5,000 to some people, it's not really a long-term sustainable plan. But let's look at, how can I make life better for the citizen? How can I lift up the minimum wage for my citizens? How can I do free buses? We can have more BRT buses and the likes for the citizen. Those things at the end of the day will play into the lives of every single Nigerian. So when we have to make decisions on things like this, we are from an informed and a better place. And on the refineries, I saw the minister mention a lot of Dangote refineries. We have 36 states in Nigeria. And if we are like one of Africa's top producing countries for petroleum, we should have at least a refinery, an effective refinery in every state of the country, working perfectly. So I feel that, yes, we love the refineries, but let's have a map onto how many refineries we intend to make in the next 5 years. How many barrels of oil do we expect from such refineries? So yes, very good thing that things that the minister has said, but we need to take a look back and look at how it drives back to the average Nigerian.
Let's get you to react to what the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timothy Silva, what he just recently said. And some of the analogies that he was making about the barber and the architect. Please react.
I partially agree with the minister that context matters. That's one of the things we always told at SPPG. Context matters. And so the socioeconomic context of policy matters. And that's what he has just alluded to by that analogy of the hair. But I also want to dwell on the fact that he spotlighted the Petroleum Industry Act. And when you look at the Petroleum Industry Act, it was celebrated, and for very obvious reasons. For years, there have been moves to pass the Petroleum Industry Bill, but it was stalled. Eventually, this government passed it. Kudos to this government. But if you look at that act, and perhaps that's what he was alluding to, that there will still be amendments. If you look at that act, the economic structure of Nigeria is still brought into question. A sector, petroleum sector, that is dominated by the government, not opened up to competitiveness. And one looks back at Nigeria's economic history, recent history actually, during the first era after the return to democracy, and you see what happened in telecoms, for instance, when the telecom sector was opened up, and suddenly from about 400,000 lines, you had the number of lines in Nigeria rising to 185 million, from investment of about $50 million. Investment in that sector rose to $70 billion, I think, about last year. Look at the ports sector as well.
I have to jump in and interrupt you there. We have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining the discussion on the program today, both you and Olufunke Olushine.